Welcome to Section 2.3 of the Foreclosure Prevention class, Signing Agency Disclosures. Disclosures and documents can be given to the client to review and sign. And then it should say, should be given to the client to review and sign. And you can do that either by mail, at a client orientation. I know in the earlier section we talked about doing group triage, so you could do it at one of those sessions. And then at the agency, before the initial counseling session, you can have them fill out the information right before they meet with the client. All supplemental documentation must be brought in for the appointment. So that tends to make it a little challenging because usually people won't want to give you their personal information until they've talked to you and gotten some information from you first. But depending on how your agency's flow works, you may have it set up where you do the triage over the phone, they sign the documents in the lobby prior to their appointment, and of course during the triage they were made aware of what documents to bring. So that's also possible. The documents for them to sign and review, there are samples of these in the appendix in the reading section, and I'm just going to go over them briefly now. The Foreclosure Prevention Intake Application, which is what your triage, your intake person will complete with them, or you may, like I said in that class, have it on your website, or you may mail it out to them, but that's one of the documents. Foreclosure Prevention Agency Disclosure, your client authorization form, very important, credit report authorization, conflict of interest statement, and these three, you see with the asterisk, these could all be combined into one document, and usually it's part of the agency disclosure form. Privacy policy, and then counseling expectations form. And it's interesting because this last one, counseling expectation form, was not something we initially used when we were doing foreclosure counseling before the mortgage meltdown. But now we found that that's very important because we can't make miracles. We can do the best we can and we can facilitate the process really well, but we can't make miracles, and so it's good to make sure you set that proper expectation, and having this documented helps prove that you did. So here is a sample of what the third-party authorization should include, and you want to make sure that this phrase, which is very important, is included, that the client gives the counseling agency and any other groups that you may share that information with permission to discuss, negotiate, and receive all materials regarding the debts with the company. So that's very important. Make sure anybody that you may be sharing this information with, if you are in a state that's hardest hit, you want to make sure that the agency that facilitates that program is also listed. I'm sure you probably have that already, but just for those of you who are new and just getting started, make sure that that's the case. Avoiding conflicts of interest. This is very important because clients should understand how the agency is funded or paid for services. That should be out in the open. They should understand delinquent mortgage payments will not be made to the agency, only to the lender or servicer. A list of board members and their affiliations should also be readily available in case someone asks. And then counselors and agencies should not provide their client list to any other entity. So they shouldn't be selling it for marketing purposes, that sort of thing. Also, both the counselor and the agency should always advise the client to do that which is in the best interest of the client, regardless of the resulting impact on the counselor or the agency. And this is also why HUD requires us to give alternatives, because that way we make sure that we're not steering the client in one direction or another. And then lastly, submitting to third-party audits or reviews help to mitigate the possibility of abuse. So it's good as an agency to have a third party come in and just take a look, just to make sure you're doing things right. Because you can be, you can look like there's a conflict of interest when there's not one. So you want to make sure that a third party can see it, bring it to your attention, so you can correct any behavior that needs to be changed. So one thing I want you to think about with this lesson is what are potential conflicts of interest in your agency? Think about that for a minute. You may even want to share that with your team. Go over that together. What are some things that you're doing now that a client could potentially see as a conflict of interest? For For instance, what if you have a relationship with a bank and they pay you to do foreclosure counseling, and you have a client who's in foreclosure with that bank? Is that a potential conflict of interest? Absolutely. So that's why in the earlier slide it said make sure you list how the agency is funded or paid for services. Make sure that's out in the open so they know. They may choose because of that to go somewhere else, and they're absolutely within their rights to do that. But you just need to make sure you disclosed and you're doing what's right. Okay? All right. That's the end of section 2.3. We're done.